The Commission will come to order, and I want to wish everybody a good afternoon. And welcome to our briefing on listening to victims of child sex trafficking. The sex trafficking and abuse of children is one of the most despicable, violent crimes on the face of the earth, shattering the lives of the victims as well as their families, a crime from which the victims often cannot recover. And when they do so, and that's rarely, they do so with great difficulty. The traffickers and abusers rely on their ability to frighten a child into silence or the reluctance of adults to listen when children speak. They also use their own reputation, standing, or power in the community to prevent allegations from being properly considered and investigated. As we have seen recently in the tragic Sandusky case, child sex abuse case at Penn State, many sexually abused children do not find a way to speak until they are adults. But when they do so and are heard, others find the courage to come forward, putting the traffickers and the abusers behind bars and bringing an end to a cycle of broken lives. It is imperative that the justice system be ready to listen to allegations and to thoroughly investigate allegations, no matter when they are raised and no matter who is accused. This year's Trafficking in Persons report, and I would note parenthetically that in 2000, I was the prime author of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, as well as two subsequent reauthorizations of the TPVA. And one of the provisions of that legislation established the annual TIP report and the ratings of countries, either Tier 1 to Tier 3. Well, the TIP report noted that although the law in the Netherlands prescribes maximum sentences ranging from 8 to 18 years imprisonment for individuals convicted of human trafficking, and that these penalties are sufficiently stringent and commensurate with those prescribed for other serious crimes such as rape, the laws are not being enforced. According to the report, and I quote, the average sentences imposed on convicted traffickers continued to be less than 2 years, 21 months to be exact. 21 months for destroying a woman's soul and body in the enslavement in the brothel. 9 convicted trafficking offenders received community service or a fine as punishment. The leader of a major Turkish-German human trafficking organization was sentenced to 7 years and 9 months imprisonment for having forced at least 120 women into prostitution. That is just 1 month in jail for every life destroyed. And by the way, the court let him out on bail, and to no surprise, he fled to Turkey. So he is currently not even serving the tiny sentence he received. That leaves me speechless. What is going on here? Do the courts in the Netherlands take human trafficking seriously? This afternoon, we're going to consider how and to what extent allegations of trafficking and abuse should be investigated. We'll do so in the context of a particular series of cases in which very, very serious allegations have been raised against the Secretary General at the Ministry of Justice in the Netherlands, Mr. Joris de Mek. Mr. de Mek has been accused by a witness that will present today of sexually abusing and raping the witness when the witness was being trafficked in a brothel in Amsterdam at the age of 15. The investigation into these accusations was suddenly and inexplicably halted, and law enforcement officials involved were allegedly sworn to secrecy. Mr. de Mek has been accused by 2 Turkish boys, now adults, of having raped them in Turkey between 1994 and the year 2003. At the time, the boys were 11 and 14. At least one of them was homeless and trusted the Turkish police officer who brought him to Mr. de Mek. The other was allegedly locked in a hotel room with Mr. de Mek, who assaulted him sexually. The allegations are shocking and horrible. Mr. de Mek has a right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and that is a sacred right that I'm sure we all want to protect. At the same time, the allegations, when taken in their full context, are credible and deserve to be properly investigated so that a prosecutor can make a responsible decision whether to proceed with the case against Mr. de Mek. That investigation has never happened. The investigations that have taken place have been a travesty and have done nothing to clear Mr. Demek's name. Rather, they have raised further questions. Yesterday, the Netherlands Minister of Security and Justice, Mr. Opstelten, wrote to the Dutch Parliament regarding this case and listing the actions taken by the Justice Department in regards to the allegations against Mr. Demek. The letter states, and I quote, "The nature of Mr. Demek's job warrants a degree of vigilance," quote unquote. I could not agree more. The fact that Mr. Demek is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Justice, the very entity responsible to investigate the charges against him, should mean that the investigation into the allegations was one of the most thorough, transparent, and well-documented investigations ever undertaken by the Netherlands. Not only are those making the allegations literally taking on the Dutch justice system in person, in the person of one of its top officials, but the reputation of the Ministry of Justice itself is on the line. Sadly, the investigation was anything but thorough, transparent, or well-documented. The very serious allegations were never given the courtesy of a criminal investigation, apparently because Mr. Demek's claims, and the Dutch cannot disprove with their own records, that Mr. Demek was in Turkey in the 1990s. Over and over again, the Justice Minister's letter to the Dutch Parliament states that there was no cause to launch a criminal investigation. With all due respect to the Dutch Justice Minister, this is a tacit admission that a thorough investigation has never been undertaken. It makes the Dutch Justice Ministry look a little bit like an ostrich with its head in the sand. The Dutch government freely admits that it never so much as interviewed one of the two alleged victims pressing charges, Mustafa, and a third victim who has now come forward, Yassine, who has also never been interviewed. Moreover, the Dutch investigation into whether there should be a real criminal investigation never interviewed the Turkish policeman, Mehmet Korkmaz, who admits that in the 1990s he abducted boys for Mr. Demek to sexually assault. Nor did the Dutch investigation speak to the former chief of police of Istanbul, Nestet Menzer, who also contradicts Mr. Demek and states that Mr. Demek was in Turkey in the 1990s and that his officers were assigned to protect him. Nor did the Dutch investigation into whether there should be a criminal investigation speak to Hüseyin Celebi, the senior Turkish intelligence officer who in 2006 wrote a report on Mr. Demek's travel to and nefarious activities in Turkey during the 1990s and early 2000s, and who also says that Mr. Demek used aliases to enter and to exit Turkey. I live a long way and work a long way from the Netherlands and do not claim expertise in the details of the Dutch justice system. But frankly, from my vantage point, I have to ask, how can a preliminary investigation not interview the victims or key witnesses and then claim there is nothing to investigate? Whether or not Mr. Demek is guilty of these allegations against him, we cannot say. But I will state my strong belief that the allegations against him will not be resolved without an actual and thorough criminal investigation into the allegations raised by the victims and supported by the Turkish government officials. The Netherlands owes this to the boys who have been grievously harmed by Mr. Demek, and the Netherlands owes this to Mr. Demek himself, whose name has been dogged by abruptly halted and grossly incomplete investigations for over a decade. Mr. Demek himself, who maintains his innocence, if he is innocent, should want this investigation to go forward so he can clear his name. So I appeal to him to state publicly his own request that an investigation be conducted. I'd like to now introduce our very distinguished witnesses for today's briefing and then ask them to proceed. We'll begin in order with BVW, who was a victim of child sex trafficking, child pornography, and pedophiles. He identified Joris Demek as a man who abused him as a child and was the primary witness giving a detail of a pedophilia ring in the Rolodex affair. This was the leading investigation into a pedophile network of the highest-ranking politicians, civil servants, and influential government and business officials in the Netherlands, which included Joris de Mek, now the Secretary General of the Dutch Ministry of Justice. His face must remain hidden due to the highly provocative and damaging information he is privy to, and regarding the significant power brokers in the Netherlands and because of threats. We will then hear from Ms. Adèle van der Plas, who has spent the last 3 decades as a criminal attorney in the Netherlands. Prior to that, she taught criminal law at the University of Utrecht. Adèle was a member of the supervisory board of the Bar Association of Amsterdam, and in a pro bono capacity, she has worked tirelessly through the years, fighting injustices and judicial bias against abuse against the system. Adèle is a tireless advocate for children and brings invaluable awareness to sex trafficking in Holland, which, according to the United Nations, is one of the top 10 destinations for human trafficking. We will then hear from Klaas Langendoen, who is the Chief of Criminal Intelligence, former Chief of the Criminal Intelligence Services for the Netherlands. Today, Klaas is a private practice and works in private practice as an independent investigator. In this capacity as Chief, he served as the lead investigator in the RT mission, where he combated drug trafficking and illegal drugs smuggled into the Netherlands. And then, finally, we will hear from Samantha Healy Vardaman, who is the lead on policy issues for Shared Hope International, coordinating advocacy efforts to further the protection of sex trafficking victims. And I would note parenthetically, with whom this commission, and me personally, with my subcommittee on Human Rights and the Foreign Affairs Committee, which I also chair, have worked on legislation over the years to ensure that we have the tools in the United States in our laws to combat this heinous trafficking in persons. So I am very, very grateful for her work and for the leadership that she has shown all these years. After directing a rule of law program in Moldova for 3 years, in which human trafficking issues frequently figured prominently, Samantha joined Shared Hope International in July of 2005 to direct the Trafficking Markets Project, resulting in a research report and documentary entitled Demand, which compares sex trafficking markets in 4 countries: Jamaica, Japan, the Netherlands, and the United States. In 2006, she began directing a 3-year research project in 10 U.S. locations into the sex trafficking of American and lawful permanent residents minors in the United States, funded by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I would just point out that we in the United States take a backseat to no one, and while we look at other countries, we look at ourselves. And this year's TIP report, as in some previous ones, likewise rates the United States, just as it does other countries, against the backdrop of what we call minimum standards, first developed in 2000 and then continuously updated over the years. We want all victims protected, whether it be in the United States, the Netherlands, or anywhere else in the world. We are joined by Ranking Member Cohen, who, sorry to put you right on the spot if you want to come back, for any comments you might have before going to our first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your calling this meeting on this topic that's so important. The idea of trafficking of children has been going on for a while, but has come to the public's attention most recently in a glaring manner. I think the world is more aware of it than ever. And we need to do all we can in the United States and throughout the OSCE and the world to end it. The idea of somebody's liberty being taken from them is the most heinous thing that I think one can have happen to them. And for children to be taken from their parents and to be used as a commodity is so immoral that the world's attention should and has come upon it, but the world's resources should also come upon it, and we should commit ourselves to doing all we can to rid ourselves of this decay that is within our world society. And I'm appreciative of the chairman for scheduling this important hearing and looking forward to the testimony of the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I'd like to now, Mr. B, if you could proceed.
Thank you very much. At the age of 14, I ran away from home due to the trauma of my parents divorcing and the misery that I had encountered at school and at home. I took the train with the destination Amsterdam, thinking that I would find a job and create a life. Upon arrival at the central station, I was approached by a man who offered me a place to stay. The following morning, I awoke without any clothes, and they were taking naked photos of me. I asked him what he was going to do with those photos. He said that he would send them to my parents if I didn't want to do what he wanted. He told me about the brothels where young boys worked. I was then brought the same day to a bar and was introduced to a man who had a brothel for young boys. I was afraid to say no, and I was very young and innocent. The owner of the brothel forced me to work in this boys' brothel, where more young minors worked. They were all underage minors between the age of 14 until 18, from various parts of Europe. All of the clients that came to this brothel were pedophiles. All the boys working, they were given drugs and alcohol. After a while, this was the daily routine of the sex, drugs, and alcohol. In addition, we are rented out for escort services to private clients and parties. The same person who ran the brothel also made child pornography films. I performed in 3 of those movies. I also knew people who made snuff movies. I was offered vast sums of money to perform I was offered vast sums of money to perform in one of these movies, but refused, due to the fact that at the end of these movies, the actor is killed. As escort, I worked for the same brothel owner and worked out of a bar called the Festival Bar, where I met Professor Van Roon. Professor Van Roon was the man who introduced me to Joris Demming. We were sitting at the table, and he said that I needed to go outside to meet Joris Demming in his car. Joris wanted to have anal sex with me, and I refused. I did have oral sex with him. The second time that we met, he wanted me to go with him to his home in The Hague, Riauwstraat 13. I didn't want to go with him, as we were forbidden to leave the city of Amsterdam by our pimp. In 1998, there was a large investigation into the pedophile network in Amsterdam and The Hague. I was approached by several police investigation units to help with the investigation. I became the key witness of the investigation and was offered police protection. During that time, I told of my entire period in Amsterdam in the child pornography and the child sex business. This investigation was called the Rolodex investigation, and Professor Van Roon was a key suspect in this investigation. He had a Rolodex, kind of a card file, where various high-ranking Dutch officials were his clients and friends. I accompanied Professor Van Roon on trips to Poland, but I don't know what he was doing there. Perhaps he was looking for boys for his clients. He was a broker in children for pedophiles in his network. After my period in Amsterdam, I lived in various places in the Netherlands. I also lived in The Hague, where an attempt to kill me was made. I was shot at 3 times. After that, I went underground and tried to hide, as the Rolodex investigation was killed and never pursued. In addition, I was asked to cooperate in a Dutch TV news show investigating Demming and high-ranking pedophiles. That show was never aired. Throughout my time in the child sex industry and after, I have been abused, rejected, raped, shot at, lied, and treated as dirt. My life has been ruined. I have to undergo long-term physical, psychological treatment, including very strong antidepressant medication. My relation with my own three children and wife has suffered intensely. I would like to ask the following. Help bring Deming to justice and his entire network of influential pedophiles. Those who abused me and many others like myself should be brought to court and punished if found guilty. Bring back the rule of law in the Netherlands. Please help protect my identity because I still fear for my life. I know too much about who are the pedophiles. Thank you for your time.
Mr. B, thank you so very much for your extraordinary courage to come here today, and
Thank
the
you.
pain and the agony which I can see on your face and hear in your voice. I can't say enough how we wish you well, and your calls, my hope, will not go unheeded. And we will do everything we can as a commission, because if we do nothing else as a commission, it's all about protecting the victims. And so, again, I want to thank you for your extraordinary courage for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
I'd like to now ask Ms. van der Plas if you would proceed.
Do you hear me now? Better? Yeah?
Yes.
A little closer, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank your commission for the invitation to inform you about 4 child abuse cases we are working on for so many years already. I myself represent 2 Turkish witnesses who were raped and sexually abused when they were 11 and 14 years old. The perpetrator was, according to my sources, a high-ranking Dutch government official nowadays, Secretary General of the Ministry of Security and Justice in the Netherlands, Mr. Joris Deming. I also represent B, who is present today and already was giving a testimony to you. B was a victim of the same Dutch high-ranking official, Mr. Deming, at the time that he, as a young boy of 14 years old, was forced to work in a brothel. I was informed about the crimes committed by Mr. Deming in Turkey by official Turkish sources. They informed me that Mr. Deming in '95 was caught in the act of sex with minors in Turkey while attending a party in Bodrum. At this party, minors were abused, sexually abused, and one of the boys tried to escape and created a great deal of emotion, which brought the police. Mr. Deming was then arrested, according to my sources, and subsequently released, after which his criminal file was used to blackmail the Dutch authorities to take action in a case against a Kurdish activist who at that time stayed in the Netherlands. I'm also the attorney of this Kurdish businessman named Mr. Babesin. The 2 well-documented criminal charges that were filed against Mr. Deming by the 2 Turkish boys, Osman and Mustafa, were never investigated according to Dutch criminal investigative procedure. The same goes for the criminal charges filed by my other client, Mr. Babesin, against Mr. Deming. The victim, who's present today, B, was in '98 key witness in the so-called Rolodex investigation, but neither his statement ever led to an investigation. Never led to an investigation or prosecution or conviction of the real perpetrators, the high-ranking customers, the Dutch super elite of the numerous minor brothels in our capital, Amsterdam, at the time. The question arises, Mr. Chairman, what is going on in the Netherlands? In your 2012 report on human trafficking, you recognized the Netherlands as a Tier 1 status country in full compliance with the minimum standards to combat trafficking in persons. And my experience in the 4 cases I represent is completely different. High-ranking government officials and politicians in the Netherlands seem to form a privileged elite who are above the law when they sexually abuse minors and will never be arrested, tried, or convicted. In 2000, The Guardian, 12 years ago, described in a very well-informed article the Netherlands and especially Amsterdam as a paradise for pedophiles where the police seemed to be powerless to act. And we now understand why. In 1998, an Amsterdam police investigation, B spoke about it, called the Rolodex Affair, was conducted into a pedophile network of influential Dutch customers of boys' brothels. The investigation targeted high-ranking Dutch officials and politicians suspected of abusing young boys in Amsterdam brothels. As a victim, B was one, what he said, of the key witnesses in that investigation. One of the suspects in that investigation was Mr. Demming. But according to leading investigators who told me that, leading investigators in this case, according to them, as soon as Demming became a person of interest in this matter, the investigation was shut down. Information about intended actions by the investigating police was leaked. A policeman who worked on this investigation said that he arrived at the location and the middleman of this network, Professor Van Roon, was waiting for the police team. And not surprisingly, all video evidence was missing and all telephone communication between the suspects, which was recorded before, suddenly stopped. Law enforcement officials on the case were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements and were sworn to secrecy regarding all information pertaining to the involvement of Demming and other high-ranking officials in this shocking behavior. Our present State Secretary of Justice, Fred Teven, directly under the Minister of Justice, was one of the leading prosecutors in this Rolodex investigation. In 2007, he expressed his frustration about the blocking of the investigation in a closed court hearing under oath. He then told the court that this investigation indeed targeted high-ranking representatives of the Dutch government, among them prosecutors, who were sexually abusing minors. He also stated under oath to the court that this investigation never has led to prosecution of these suspects because of certain contra-actions. 2007, he stated that under oath. And when a Dutch publication in the Gay Krant accused Mr. Demming in 2003 of being involved in the abuse of minor boys in a park in the south of Netherlands, the newspaper, the Gay Krant, for homophile people, the newspaper was forced to withdraw its accusations under threat of bankruptcy by Demming's lawyer. The editor of the Gay Krant, Henk Krol, at the moment parliament member in the Netherlands, was told by Demming in a private meeting directly after that he, Demming, indeed has had sex with young boys without asking their age. But Demming let Krol know during that same meeting, remember well, Mr. Krol, that we are the ones who make the laws in this country. In 2008 and 2010, I filed 3 well-documented criminal charges against Mr. Demming on behalf of my Turkish clients Osman and Mustafa for rape and sexual abuse of minors under the age of 16. The criminal charges filed by Mustafa against Demming were never really investigated. The Dutch authorities dismissed the allegations after demanding that Mustafa first had to travel to the Netherlands to officially answer their questions. But meanwhile, the boy was heavily threatened and abused in Turkey. His tongue was cut with a razor blade. You have to shut your mouth, in an effort to quash his complaint. The boy was approached by the then high-ranking police chief, Emin Arslan, in Turkey, who offered him a good life in case he withdrew his charges against Demming. If not, the boy's life would be destroyed, so they told him. The boy was frightened to death, but never withdrew his charges against Demming. He had his experience in Turkey, where you don't have any right in front of such high-ranking officials. And as a result of what happened,